I cannot believe that this deck is doing as well as it is for me in Marvel Snap. Sera Surfer has been honestly kind of a joke for an extended period of time. This is like the bad surfer. If you talk to high elo players, they will denigrate this deck fairly often, and I think it shows just what an open metagame we have right now and just how many ways there are to get to a competitive number of points while still playing a decent amount of interactivity. And by decent amount of interactivity, I mean playing Shadow King. But I really think that what this deck demonstrates is that the metagame has so few dominant tyrants that are forcing people to play certain ways that for the first time in, frankly, the calendar year 2026, you can kind of just do a lot of what you want to be doing. Now, I'm not saying this is the best metagame in Marvel Snap of all time, but it certainly feels like a really good one when I can climb 100 SP playing Sera freaking Surfer. So let's take a look at the individual cards that make this deck tick, and also discuss which ones I think are and are not replaceable. Storm Horseman of Famine has a 3-1 stat line, which you might think of as a downside, but it's actually kind of the dream. The way this deck works is there are various slots in here that you can change out for tech. The build I played was the one that has the least tech in it, but you can play things like Killmonger in this list, and cards like Killmonger and Shadow King really want you to not have priority when you're playing them. So this means that cards that are able to represent a lot of power theoretically in hand, while not actually representing that power on the board, are a big part of what this deck wants to do. Or to put it in practical terms, the curve of Storm on 3 into Mother Ascani on 4 into Sera on 5 means you are playing a bunch of stuff and you are almost never going to have priority. And that curve is sort of what this deck is premised on. Don't get me wrong, Brood is still a really good card in a traditional Surfer list, but he's definitely a worse card here than he is in the Stick, Maverick, Pass the Buff lists. And I think that that does matter, but it's not like you're ever going to realistically cut him anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. This is definitely not the guy you know from the other versions of this kind of deck, though, but I think we have finally reached a point where Surfer, as constituted like trying to be a Surfer deck, has just become a different deck from whatever Maverick, Stick, and Captain Carter are doing. Even if it plays a lot of the same cards, it just is not playing the same game. And the same goes for Captain Carter, who honestly I would go so far as to say is like kind of very mid in a deck like this. I think one of the things people might struggle with is remembering how to play this compared to the other versions of the Captain Carter combo deck, because you have a lot of cards that seem similar, but they're not doing the same things. Captain Carter is like mostly worse than Sebastian Shaw in this deck. Not always, but like mostly worse than Sebastian Shaw, because you're not actually all that good at filling those lanes up. And so she's a fine, good card, but she's definitely much more reasonable and much less ridiculous than she is when she's being used to her fullest extent in the combo decks. Silver Surfer is just doing some good work. This is a deck that is more built around Silver Surfer and stacking up smaller buffs than the Captain Carter decks, which are built around Maverick and stacking up giant buffs. So this is very much an actual Surfer deck. What we're doing is we're trying to cheat energy basically across the entire game, whether that be Namorita or on 3 into Mother Ascani into Sera, or Storm on 3 into Mother Ascani into Sera. That's really the goal here, just have an explosive final turn with some possible tech options for decks that are a little more explosive than us, and Surfer is a big part of that explosive power, especially thanks to Venus. Makari is just kind of here. I've got no real complaints about her, but I wouldn't say that you need to go get Makari to play this deck. In fact, I think this is an easy swap for Killmonger or something like that, Mobius or something like that. Just if you want to play something that's a meaningful roadblock. I will say this is not as good of a Mobius deck as it is of a Killmonger Shadow King deck, because again, it's really about turn 6, so it wants the tech cards that matter on turn 6, and Mobius definitely doesn't do that. So on turn 3, a lot of the time what you'd be doing with that Mobius is like playing it instead of a Viv Vision or a Storm, and you really don't want to be doing that. You want to be playing the things that stack up in your hand over time. But I do think that at least a Killmonger is a very reasonable swap for pretty much any of the cards I flag that you don't have that I don't call integral to the game plan, which really I would argue probably Namorita is a very reasonable one and Makari is the other very reasonable one. This is a much better Venus deck than the Captain Carter combo decks are, because Venus is a deck that is built for Venus is a card that is built for a deck that is built on small buffs. She is not nearly as impactful when you're doing something that is patently ridiculous, like prodigying your Captain Carter onto a Maverick and then playing that onto a Brute. You're getting 60 power. You don't really care that 60 becomes 63 or whatever. It's just not really impactful. But when you're playing a smaller, more mid-rangey game plan, and especially as this deck gets a little more tech-heavy, Venus is a great card to just be playing on turn 6 to make your Surfer give more stuff. And that's kind of one of the things this deck is actually built to do. Whether that be Mother Ascani or Sera, you are trying to get discounts such that your 3s become 2s and your final turns are, at minimum, playing 3 3s. At maximum, you can play a lot more than 3 3s, and if one of those 3s is Venus, she really juices the ability of cards like Surfer to buff the rest of your cards. This deck is secretly somewhere between Phantom X and Doom 2099 in my head where I categorize it. In terms of point output, it's very Doom 2099-ish, and in terms of the ability to play cards like Killmonger and Shadow King, it's very Phantom X-ish. We're not as good as a Mobius deck as Phantom X is, and that is a meaningful loss, but if you are struggling against things Killmonger would be good against, it's a very easy card to get in here, and Shadow King is great for any deck that plays green power, even though you might not think that it is, as long as you can hide your green power from the Shadow King, and you very often can do that, because basically 100% of your green power is coming down on the same turn as the Shadow King, which is to say turn 6. So this is a very easy deck to play. It has a great Shadow King and a lot of power to go along with it, and that means that it is very able to beat other decks that are a little bit more board based with their green power. It's really good into decks that are playing things like the Zombie Package or other Venus decks or the Captain Carter combo decks, because a lot more of their green power is available on the board for you to Shadow King. Those decks are not typically able to play Shadow King because their green power is on the board. You can because yours mostly isn't. Viv Vision is mostly worse than Storm Horseman. There are certain cases where, like, if I have a Makari and they haven't played into a lane and they don't seem like a good tempo deck and I have a Sebastian Shaw in hand, I will go for a Viv Vision instead of a Storm Horseman, but it is pretty rare. She's definitely playing second fiddle here. It can happen. It is not the kind of thing that happens all of the time, but she does some decent work in those situations. The downside on her still is pretty pronounced, which is sometimes she will mess your game up and you will get totally jacked up because she has moved to the wrong location. That is a really pronounced downside on a card like this, but I do think that generally she is kind of the second best thing if you can get her rolling on turn 3. Namorita, definitely another flex spot. The idea here is that instead of stacking buffs, you can stack discounts. So instead of going, Storm or Viv Vision on 3, stacking buffs in your hand, and then going, Mother Ascani Sera, what you're doing is Namorita and then Mother Ascani Sera. So you're stacking your discounts. These lines are very reliant on Surfer, and I think that you do run into that with this deck where it's like, you have all this stuff and then you don't have good ways to buff it if you don't draw Surfer. Definitely a real thing. But right now, I think a lot of what Namorita does falls into that category where, like, at least when you have Storm, at least when you have Viv Vision, you're getting something into the hand in terms of power. So she's definitely the weakest of your 3s that you play on 3. Sebastian Shaw is a really solid card in a list like this, because basically what you're trying to do with him is either copy him with a Mother Ascani, which pretty big guy, or just generally get some buffs onto him, which pretty big guy, additional discounts like Sera, pretty big guy, pretty cheap guy. Pretty straightforward from here, but really the card that makes this whole thing even function is Shadow King, right? Like, the whole reason this deck gets to work is that all of your green power doesn't stay on the board. So keep in mind, what you're playing on turn 3 is a hand enabler. What you're playing on turn 4 is a discounter. What you're playing on turn 5 is a discounter. That is how you want the game to go. It's actually a very flowcharty deck. Your focus should basically always be on making sure that you are getting as much power for as little cost in your hand as you possibly can that will not be exposed to your Shadow King, which you will probably need because there are a bunch of other decks that have better green power plans than you. This guy's just a really big guy. Can't say enough nice things about Mother Ascani. There are complicated decks in Marvel Snap and there are simple ones. And part of the reason I compare this to Doom 2099 is it is incredibly flowcharty. You play on turn 3 one of the 3 cards that does something beneficial for your hand or your future draws. On turn 4, you want to play this. On turn 5, you want to play Sera. It actually is that simple. Now, there is nuance game to game, but there are very few decks in Marvel Snap that are able to be flowcharted like that and have it be even remotely accurate. A lot of the rest of the decks are going to be about more important things, like tempo decks that care about certain ordering or specific things in specific matchups. This deck has one plan, and it either executes that plan or it doesn't. Sera Surfer. Now, people might not know this about me, but my logo is based off of this variant right here. Sera used to be like the card in Marvel Snap. It's been a very long time, 4 years, in fact, since that was true. But Sera decks used to be kind of like this. The idea was basically you had relevant tech, you had good points, and you would just be better at allocating it on the final turn of the game. And it has never actually been the best deck since then because things have changed in various metagames, but largely there's been a lot of focus on proactive tempo stuff, super giant decks, Professor X decks back when those were a major thing, or combo decks that go over the top. And I think it is a marker of a fairly balanced metagame that you can do this right now, that I can do this right now, and do as well as I did with it. An update on #wide KMGate, as I've taken to calling it. Multiple people posted in my Discord with pixel by pixel analysis of me having been widened slightly or squished on the vertical axis. Now, I believe I have fixed it in this video. What I have done is I have vetted every single transform in OBS. I have vetted every single transform in my editing system, so we are rendering in the right thing. Everything is going perfectly. I even turned down my thing from 4K to 1080p. I'd put it to 4K, not actually when this started, but a little bit there. And what we think may have happened is my camera has various settings that allow it to like zoom slightly or recrop a little bit. What we think may have happened is it got set from 1 to 1.15, which squished me by about 7 to 8% for reasons that I cannot figure out. I have reset it to what I believe it was previously, so wide KM should be gone. I don't know if this is real, and if it isn't this, and you guys are still seeing it, I don't know if I can fix it. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the gameplay we're about to cut into, and of course, I will see you in the next one. I do not want her ass chilling for free. Bad. This might be a turn 3 brood angle with scanning Surfer. Not sure. I'll play. Nice. Have Viv Vision and Namorita been very non-bowish yet? Not particularly. Sure. I'm not really sure how I don't win here. Yep.
Victory.
Ranya. What the fuck? What the fuck? Okay, this is kind of messed up, right?
Opponent snapped.
I'll stay because I think I'm doing some pretty jacked up, cheap Captain Carters here. I think I am doing reasonably powerful stuff. That is a human torch.
Such is my judgment.
Yeah. I mean, do I feel bad? A little. Bad a little, right? Like,
Victory.
most mediocre thing possible. Kind of the vibe, I think. Oh, fuck. Splat's doing something. I don't remember what this was. This could be anything. Splat could literally be doing anything. Yeah, that makes sense. Pro 4?
Oh, snap.
I just feel like what I'm doing is really dumb. You know what I mean? Okay. God bless. Let you be. Man. Big Demon. We're adding 18 to the right, dude. The only question is if we win every lane here. Which it sure looks like we do. Yeah. Shadow King? Shit like this, that's why. We're chilling. It's amazing. Oh, this is the discard guy. Beat the shit out of me earlier. For some reason, I can't beat discard. Haven't entirely figured out why, but it's definitely true. Lead an APOC. Yeah, man, you fucking got me.
Reborn.
Shit for this. Corvus to Gambit. Alright, so their hand is Scorn APOC. So then this is Sera, Rude Surfer Shaw, final turn.
You won't need this anymore.
APOC. Can I just snap this?
I am Apocalypse. Oh, snap.
I mean, I know what's in your hand. They'd have to have another one drop to beat me left, and I don't think they can do it. I'm not even sure they win any of these lanes. I haven't done any math. Like, who knows? Yeah.
Victory.
Yeah. They thought it was a good game. Which, to be clear, I already knew because they won. Yeah, they did the GG before the RNG and then the GG after. Like, all right, man. he's playing Snowguard, he's playing Mobius, so we can't really snap. Despite how much I want to. I like how I say we can't really snap, and then I, like, proceed to do it. Akari kind of fucking me here. Have I? Wait a minute. What happened this game? If I played Captain Carter last turn, I'm going to play Storm this turn. So it's going to work, right? Nice.